I love that Anna and Grace ended their discussion on the topic of accessibility because that's a great launching point into our panel tonight. I have the great honor of welcoming you all to tonight's panel, Programming for Everyone. Sorry, little Zoom pop-up, special days and every day. We have a great lineup of panelists for you tonight. We can see their beautiful faces on the screen, and I'm sure they're all turned on their video cameras, so as they're talking, you can see them as well. We've got Jeremy Chesson, Ellen Dickinson, Linda DeZuris, Andrea McCready, and Tiffany Ang. We want this panel to be interactive, so I do have a few Zoom polls lined up for all of you tonight. I highly encourage you all to also drop questions into the chat like you've already been doing. I'll be actively moderating the chat. So before I unleash our panelists tonight, I want to do just a few quick Zoom polls just so that we can get a pulse of our room and so our panelists know what they're working with. So with that, Chloe, can you launch the first poll, please? Hopefully that should pop up on your screens for you all. There you go, perfect. We'll just keep these open for just a couple of seconds, but what's your programming style? Choose as many as apply. Are you a on-the-fly kind of programmer, someone who programs just week by week? Do you post or print your programs? Do you program things well in advance? Or is your attitude, I love programming, it's a ton of fun? All right, I'll give people just a couple more seconds. Lots of responses coming in. Really exciting. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share results. Looks like we have lots of folks kind of all over the spectrum, which is really exciting. Can we also do question number 2? All right, this one's easy, just agree or disagree. Programming diverse music is difficult due to a lack of scores and or resources. Again, we'll just leave this open for just a couple of seconds here. I see a tug of war on my end in terms of agree, disagree. All right, I'm going to end the poll. We've got about 50-50 with disagree pulling ahead. Hopefully we can help turn some of those agrees into disagrees tonight as we have our panelists share some resources to help you all program beautiful music for your audiences to hear. All right, amazing. With that, I'll have all of our panelists kind of go ahead and share some thoughts that they have in best practices on programming. With that, Jeremy, do you mind kicking us off?
Yeah, so these are, I don't make a lot of programs for my special holiday recitals or special event recitals. So these are just a few programs that show a little bit about what sorts of things I kind of like to pay attention to when I'm programming. So I think when I first started programming, I would just program like real repertoire. And I think I don't even think I was the only person. I don't think I even liked all of it that I played, but I just felt like it was the thing that I should be playing. And after a while, I realized, you know, like we spend a lot of our time in the tower alone, and I love being up there and making music for myself. But one of the things that I think is really great is when I'm walking around campus and a lot of people know who I am and that I play the carillon, and they stop me and they'll say, oh, you know, you played this piece last week and it was a piece that my mother used to sing to me, and it just took me back to my childhood. And when I hear things like that, that make connections, and to feel like I've connected to somebody on the ground is a really important thing. And so one thing that I've really been trying to do in my programming for a long time is to play things that people will recognize, and to kind of hook them and bring them in and draw them in. And then I play something that maybe is unfamiliar to them. And I find that it's a great way to no one's gonna really pay attention to the carillon music if it's not something they know. Though I find that they kind of need something familiar to kind of hook them in and get them interested to what they do. And then once they're listening, then I play for them something a little bit more carillon-y or something a little bit different. And so I like to do a few of those sorts of things when I'm performing. Sorry, I'm really distracted by the screen. I'm gonna not look at it. That's one thing that I have tried to do. And I know that sometimes people think we shouldn't, dumb down our recitals to reach people. But if you're only playing things that people don't know, then the carillon music just kind of functions like a background thing for them. And so I like to sort of mix it and find a way to play something that people can sing along to. I think everyone likes to sing, so I like to do things that have like a melody they can sing along to, or try to pick things from a variety of different cultures or different regions of the country. And maybe that's not going to appeal to everybody, but over the course of all my recitals, hopefully something like that rings true with somebody. And I think there's not a million things published from a variety of different cultures. And so I really, for myself, a while ago, started to just improvise arrangements from like a piano score or from a lead sheet. And that's something I encourage my students to do too, because that opens for me a lot more different types of repertoire and accessibility. And so that's kind of my approach to programming, is that I do want to hook people with something that's familiar to them. And of course, I can't know my entire audience at one time. So as I go through my weekly and daily recitals and also my summer series, I try to make sure that at some point there's a point of connection that I can make with somebody and hope to draw them into the carillon. Because otherwise the carillon's just this tower here that's making background music. And if people don't recognize something, it's harder for them to think of that as anything other than the background. And for me, that's been really helpful for creating connections between people. And that makes me also much happier when I know that people care about the music that I'm playing and that I've had some sort of connection with them. And I think it's easier, but I don't think you have to, quote unquote, dumb it down. I think it's possible as a way to bring them in and then give them some other things that they might think about, and then maybe give them something else that they are familiar with too, so you can kind of keep their attention and engage it. And so I think this is a Janet Dundor thing that she said, you should either know the piece you're on because it's familiar, or you're playing a piece that is not familiar, but the piece before it was familiar, so they know where they are in the program. So as a good rule of thumb, people should be able to kind of figure out where you are in the program without having any program notes or ringing two bells before the second piece, because you're programming enough things that are familiar to them that they can make that connection and stay engaged with the carillon during the playing. And so that's something that I kind of follow a lot. I'll stop talking.
Thanks, Jeremy, and apologies all for the distracting Zoom. Didn't want to take away from Jeremy's comments there, but let me go ahead and pass it off to our next panelist, Ellen.
Okay. So I love everything Jeremy said, and I also have been thinking about how programming a broad and diverse repertoire is definitely a journey. And I want to suggest that the journey to broadening starts with playing music by living composers. So lifting up communities, music by women, Black composers, all these things are so important. But the actual first step might be to play some music by living composers, and everything else comes out of that. So we can all kind of do one thing, incorporate something into our program that adds a new dimension. I want to also say that when you're uncertain about how to program a new dimension, universal themes are so helpful. So universal themes apply to everyone. No one is left out. Hope and healing, lullabies, stars and planets. These are themes that everyone can relate to, and they're not defined by geography, race, gender, religion, anything like that. And part of why I like them so much for programming is that they allow for all the music, classical, folk, new compositions, popular songs, definitely music for everyone. And then I guess the other main point I want to make is just to say that we are doing so well. There's so much to do, but we have come a long way, and there's so many great things that are happening right now. So in this Congress, we have 7 recitals with 70 pieces. 32 of them are original carillon compositions. 15 of those 32 are by women. 38 are arrangements, and of those, 18 are arranged by women. 70 pieces, 45 performed by women. So that's just an example of something that might have changed in some decades. And we've got so many composers and cultures represented, and amazing projects going on now and more in the works. So, you know, there's a lot more to do, but I think it's important to keep the perspective that we are doing the work. It's happening and ripple effects, great things are happening. I'd like to share my Black History Month program from this year. Lynnli, if you want to pull that up. What I love about this is how much diversity there is within the theme. So the Black History Month theme, I was asked to do a performance this year in February, which I was happy to do, but it was incredibly daunting because that's a lot of different music. So this program was also highly publicized because it was the only live music that could happen at that point in the pandemic, and everyone was standing in the cold to listen. And it seemed like everyone learned something about the breadth and diversity of culturally Black music, because it's not one thing or a few things, it's so many things. So spiritual songs from Africa, civil rights songs, reggae, soul, pop, gospel, everything. So that's the first program I was going to show. And we don't have that. Okay,
Apologies.
and then so we can share that at some point. And then 2 weeks later, I was asked to make my weekly recital about marking 1 year of the pandemic. So for that program, I intentionally played 2 pieces from the Black History Month program, partly because they fit well, but also so that they could be recognized. And let's see, also in that program was Healing Bells, which Pamela has shared with us and Grace mentioned, as well as Shaman by Alice Gomez, which I really enjoy playing, and Hana wa Saku, Flowers Will Bloom, the Japanese song written 10 years after the earthquake in Japan, 10 years ago after the earthquake. And it's a beautiful message of hope. So finally, I just want to say these pieces are for all the time. So the music from the Black History Month program isn't just for February. I love to play these things all the time. Indigenous music isn't just for the second Monday in October, Indigenous Peoples Day, but the occasion is a great motivator. It's like a deadline to arrange new songs and to think about what to add. It helps spur on the new music in our repertoire. And then once you've added the songs, you can play them anytime. So I'll stop right there. Thanks.
Thank you, Ellen. And I'll make sure all of the sample programs that panelists mentioned are sent out as a PDF to folks so that you can peruse them when Zoom's not cooperating. All right, next up, I'll hand it over to Linda.
Hello, everybody. I want to start off talking about being on a university campus. One of the main reasons that we have a carillon on our campus, it started as a military academy. And when one of the classes was thinking about giving a gift back to the university, they remembered a small barrack bell that would ring. And it goes back to, the talk that we had earlier about a sense of place. And they wanted graduates who left whenever they heard a single bell ring, wherever they were in the world, it would remind them of their Clemson family and being in this place. So just a single bell can have that connection, that connective ability. And so that's important. And so obviously we play things like, the alma mater and our school song, the Tiger Rag, and that every time people hear that, that's an instant connection. And as far as special concerts, sometimes we do the special concerts and we have to make sure that people, if you're not having a printed program, that it gets publicized and people know what the music is that they're listening to. So you can play it all you want. People might say, oh, that's a nice melody. But if they don't understand that connection, we're missing an opportunity there. And so one example is we have an upstate international society in our community. And in March, they have a kickoff, and that's their international month. And they said, well, we have this sister city in Italy, and they ring a bell, 100 times. So could you ring the bell 100 times to kick us off? And I'm like, well, sure, but nobody's going to understand why we're ringing a bell 100 times, so it doesn't have that connection. So I said, wouldn't it be better if, I take a look at our international student community and see what nations are represented in our student population and play their national anthem? At least there'll be some connection with us. And then I get our students who are studying Carillon involved, and they each pick, a nation, and they get to learn that song. And then we invite that population to come and listen. So it has that connection and some meaning, and then we can, further, publicize that, and people can make that connection. And just on a regular basis, I think it's important for students who are learning to play songs that they know, and also for our audience. And so we just look online, especially for pop music, because there aren't a lot of arrangements. And now that we have, I think, a good showing of Carillon music on Sheet Music Plus, people have been doing arrangements of a lot of copyrighted things for Carillon that's accessible. So that's a good resource. And I'd like to, sometimes we see in that poll, a lot of people program on the fly. I think that's great. So on a rainy day, play something like Singing in the Rain, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. And people are like, yes, it's raining, but they all hear this common thing, and they're like, we can all, relate to, yes, it's raining. Or After the Rain, Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles. Everybody's out. We have a big green where everybody gathers. So like Jeremy said, one of the best places is an easy piano book. So Hal Leonard publishes The Beatles' Best. You can open it up, and a beginning Carillon student can play that because it's thin in texture. It has a simple bass line that you can follow, and people can recognize the tune really easily. I had students, well, we actually got in trouble because they played it at 7 a.m, but on final exam weekend, they played the Final Countdown. But I got so many calls saying, we heard the Final Countdown. I'm like, yeah, but sorry, it was like at 7 a.m. But so things like that, people really connect to something familiar. And then, as Jeremy and Ellen both said, then you can go off and play something that's more contemporary and say, okay, not only can you do these songs that but listen to, the virtuosity of this, and then everybody gets tied together. So there's a lot that you can do, and just be creative and have fun with it. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Linda. What you just said about working with students, I think also really resonated with me. For programming, I think is hard work. And I think as much as we can crowdsource from our community, ask our community, what is it that you want to hear? I think that's a great way of capturing their attention and then using that as a segue into introducing them to even cooler music. All right, up next, I'll hand it over to Andrea.
Hi there, thank you, Lynnli. I had lots and lots of thoughts from a maybe longer perspective. I believe our repertoire really reflects our background, training, life experiences, and of course the settings of our carillons, and of course the interactions, as with this Congress, with our colleagues and communities. Ellen featured my video of Buffy St. Marie's We Are Circling right at the beginning of the Congress. And Buffy wrote that this song encapsulates her own philosophy of life, that we're all ripening all the time, everywhere, and that is good. So I think back of where does my programming come from? It's from life experiences and training and my carillon settings and so forth. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, nowhere near a carillon, but I was in a family of classical music lovers and singers, and I began classical piano study at age 6. But by the 1960s and the late 1960s, I was also heavily influenced by folk music and the anti-war and civil rights rock and pop. Now, my undergraduate training was at Trinity, yay, Trinity. And I was a Russian and Chinese history major while doing pre-med and studying music, classical piano, harpsichord, and voice at Hart Music Conservatory. In other words, I didn't know what the heck I wanted to be when I grew up. I lucked out with a fellowship to study the carillon in Europe after I graduated. And then I went on to do my medical training in Montreal and Toronto, French Canada, English Canada, with a final segment of training in Northern Ontario with Indigenous communities. And over my medical career, I served as a doctor for a rural health clinic with the Hill tribes in Northern Thailand, as a director for the Indian Health Service in the Pacific Northwest, as a director for an urban clinic for homeless and AIDS patients in Spokane. And so obviously I had a lot of exposure to many different groups. And at the same time, I didn't give up the carillon. I played in both sacred and secular settings, Trinity for 4 years, St. Joseph's Oratory in Montreal for 4 years, the Canadian National Exhibition, which is very much a big, it's like a giant state fair, except it's a national fair in Toronto. And then for 18 years at the Cathedral of St. John the Evangelist in Spokane. And now for the last 13 years at the Peace Tower in Ottawa. Each venue has basically dictated the choice of repertoire and the conversation that you might have with your unseen audience. Campus carillons can be very open and free with what they play, while church settings, of course, are more confined to hymns and classical music and carillon compositions. Now, the Peace Tower is a national and international icon, and it's by far the most challenging, but at the same time, liberating instrument that I've ever played as far as diverse programming. I have to play over 200 recitals a year. Holy mackerel. Before that, I was playing, about 1 or 2 formal recitals a week. Now, my audience currently consists not only of Canadians of all generations, but also tourists from all corners of the world and parliamentarians, so I might influence them. And since 2018, we have audio live streamed all the recitals from our website, which reaches listeners nationally and internationally. So I have a responsibility to play for all sorts of occasions. And before I came to Ottawa at the cathedral, I would, mainly for weddings or funerals, do 1 or 2 special arrangements per year. But now I have to arrange all sorts of things. I do about 1 or 2 arrangements a week. Not all of them are masterpieces, but they speak to the audience or to the occasion. And to do this, I reach out to Canadian audiences all across the country and ask if I may adapt their music, respecting their copyrights. And I would encourage you to make sure that your venues have some sort of contract with BMI or ASCAP or SOCAN or something, so that those musicians get what they are due, and also respecting their cultural ownership. I always notify them when I'm going to premiere their pieces. I try to send them a courtesy recording for their personal library. I also really enjoy working with composers. I am not a composer. In fact, I can't even improvise. I do a lot of write it out arrangements, but I really enjoy working with composers, introducing them to the carillon. I don't mess with their concepts, but I try to make their pieces playable and carillonistic. And then when it comes to requests, do you play requests? I always answer, I am open to suggestions. If I don't know the song, I'll check it out on YouTube and check its acoustic potential for the carillon. Then I try to get a score, maybe from musicnotes.com or Sheet Music Plus. But I always, and this dates back decades, even to the first Dominion carillioner, Percival Price, say, check the lyrics. I will not adapt a piece whose text is inappropriate, not only for the occasion, but might contain violent, misogynistic, or obscene, or offensive text. We play singing towers. And while we are not vocally singing, our listeners, as they hear the melody, will mentally sing the words. And as Luke Rombouts reported in his Twitter survey, which I found really fascinating, 95% of the feedback is positive, and people will recognize this, but they'll also think the words. So be careful about that. Now, other people have mentioned this. One thing is that really can grip people from your tower is not just playing things you recognize, but a tolling of the bell will reach right into your heart and stop people and say, why is the tower doing that? And they will think of a commemoration or a death or what has just hit the news. So that's something else I really appreciate in my position now. So thank you.
Thank you. And speaking of arrangements, this might be a good time for us to do another quick poll. If we don't mind, can we launch poll 9? It's going to ask kind of just your general thoughts of arrangements. Do you arrange? Do you like arranging? Is this something that's difficult? Or is it something you avoid at all costs? So I'll give that a second just to pop on your screen. And then we have one more panelist to hear from before we open it up for open Q&A. All right, and I think that should be up on your screens. Just give it a couple of seconds. All right, great. Closing the poll in just 3, 2, and 1. I love that so many folks on the line love arranging for the carillon. I think I kind of fall into this middle camp of, yes, I do it, but it is kind of hard. So I appreciate some of the recommendations we've already heard tonight about using some simple piano music. And then we do have a couple of folks that I think we can convert from the no category. All right. With that, I'll hand it over to Tiffany.
Hi, and thank you to all of the previous panelists for these amazing comments. I'm going to go in the direction of Anna and Grace and talk more conceptually about programming. A friend once quipped to me when I joined the University of Michigan that I had been appointed Father Time of campus. I thought it was funny at first. Then I realized it wasn't so funny. Father Time is a governing figure who regulates stereotypes, right? Girls become women who get married and bear children. Boys go off to war, they come home as men, and they work while the wife raises the kids. They die and the cycle starts anew. I started to think of mother time as an alternative model in the sense of caring for family and creating a welcoming sense of home, where family is the community. Carillonists of any gender can do this, and I'm really inspired by my colleagues Pamela Ryder-Feenstra and the late Ray McClellan in this area. So mother time for me moves in 3 cycles of caring. First, there is the recurring calendar cycle of dates. My student researcher Emmett Lewis helped me create an interactive solidarity calendar of these dates in the US that you can see on the screen here. So we can see that there are special months like Black History Month, which Ellen mentioned, Women's History Month, Latinx Heritage Month, etc. And I keep folders or bibliographies of music for each of those. There are weeks such as Suicide Prevention Week. In September, I play an arrangement of Alicia Cara's Scars to Your Beautiful and other pop music for that I've had to arrange. And there are also days, right? Like National Coming Out Day is one of my favorites because it's a chance to play I'm Coming Out by Diana Ross and other Pride music. So these alternative cycles of time honor the richness of our diversity and support listeners whose histories and struggles are often not acknowledged inside the classroom. And just to be clear, I teach on a university campus, so we do have that freedom. The second cycle is what I call just on time solidarity for events that come together quickly. If you'll pull up the next slide, Julie Ju played the national anthem as thousands of people sang along at the Women's March in New York. And I don't know if that video will play in this mode. To start at a different place, but I just wanted you to hear a little clip. So that's just on time solidarity, right? The Women's March came together so quickly. Let's do the next slide, 3 of 4. The final mother time cycle is the fastest, and that is of the cultural first responder, as I call it. Andrea alluded to this in tolling the Great Bell in response to current events. If we do play frequent recitals, I know not everybody does. We can't be the first to care for our communities after a traumatic event. I'm talking about mass shootings, hate incidents, you name it. It's always on the news. These rapid response concerts within 24 to 48 hours create a new time and space for people to come together and to acknowledge and process their grief. Now, these concerts don't replace events that come directly from organizers in the affected communities, but we can be the first on the scene to provide musical emergency care for those in pain. And I know a lot of you already do. So let's do the final slide here. I just wanted to give 2 examples of cultural first responders out of a few, oh, no, there it is on the side in the blue box. So the first example is from my colleague, Colin Knapp, who is now actually studying Carillon with Lynnli. 2 days after the Pulse nightclub shooting, he organized Requiem for Orlando. It was attended by 2,000 people who came for the Mozart Requiem to honor the Pulse nightclub folks. And we told the Great Bell 49 times for the lives lost. And I also just want to, in the third bullet, honor our late colleague, Ray McClellan. When a swastika, unfortunately, was graffitied on our campus, he responded with full recitals of Jewish music that were embraced by the Jewish community on campus. And that was just, again, right away. So just in summary, for national months, weeks, and days, as well as just-in-time solidarity and being a cultural first responder, those are the cycles of mother time that for us at Michigan help us serve our listeners. Thanks.
Thank you. I loved the video and audio example, and of course, I loved the shout out for Colin, who is a fabulous carillonneur at IU that I'm very glad to have. He's a great programmer all around. All right, I think with that, we've heard remarks from all of our panelists, so thank you so much for sharing your knowledge.